Russia says that the Syrian ceasefire was violated 9 times in the past 24 hours, while the EU declares that the Russian pullout may slow the flow of refugees to Europe. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry calls the Islamic State's atrocities committed against Christians and Shiites a genocide. And the Brazilian parliament approves a committee to examine the impeachment of President Dilma Rousseff, and comes as a judge blocks Lula da Silva's appointment as chief of staff. Good evening. Welcome to i24 News. Russia's defense ministry said on Thursday that a cessation of hostilities in Syria had been violated 9 times in the past 24 hours. The ministry said in a statement that the violations had occurred in the Aleppo, Damascus, and Idlib provinces. Meanwhile, the European Commissioner head said today that Russia's military pullout from Syria is welcome and could help slow the flow of refugees, causing Europe's worst migrant crisis in decades.
I welcome the initiatives taken by the Russian leadership to withdraw from Syria. It could easily be that this would reduce the number of refugees being willing to come to Europe, but it's too early to say.
And Syrian Kurds declared they are setting federal autonomy in northern Syria today, a move which could have serious influence on the Syrian civil war, as well as the Kurds in Turkey and Iraq. i24 News reporter Uri Shapira with the story.
Kurds in northern Syria approved the establishment of a federal system. Members of the Syrian Kurdish party said they are working on formalizing the semi-autonomous zone they have established during the 5 years of war and creating a model for decentralized government throughout the country. However, not everyone welcomed the initiative.
It is not the Kurds who announce it. The people who announce it are the Democratic Union, a small Kurdish party that had a lot of military support from many sides. We as the Kurdish National Council are in favor of federalism, a federal state and a sectarian constitution, but not in this formula. It should be within a national Syrian agreement confirmed in the constitution of the country.
The Syrian Kurds announcement received an unexpected response from the United States, once considered an ally of the Kurds.
In response to that, I would just say we've been very clear that we won't recognize any kind of self-autonomous or self-rule semi-autonomous zones in Syria.
Supporting the Kurds may also be a source of dispute between Russia and Turkey. Russia recently announced that it's important to involve Syrian Kurds in the Geneva talks on ending the Syrian civil war.
Because inviting Kurds, the Democratic Union Party, is blocked only by Turkey. It is the only country which, judging by the latest actions, not only in Syria, but also in the dialogue with the EU, sees an ultimatum as the only means of moving forward, no matter what topic is being discussed by Ankara or any of its partners.
The Kurds in Turkey are a hunted minority consisting of 15 to 25% of the population. In Iraq, the Kurds have an autonomous area in the northern region with its capital in Erbil. The situation is different in Syria, where the Kurds consist of less than 10% of the population and are located mostly in the north of the country. Now, when Syrian Kurds are seeking to declare a federation in 3 western Kurdish enclaves, the road to a Kurdish state may be just a matter of time. But until then, the Kurds will have to defeat another fierce rival, the Islamic State extremist jihadist group.
And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry declared today that violence by the Islamic State against religious minorities was nothing short of a genocide, also adding that the actions by IS constitute a crime against humanity.
My purpose in appearing before you today is to assert that in my judgment, Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups in areas under its control, including Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims. Daesh is genocidal by self-proclamation, by ideology, and by actions, in what it says, what it believes, and what it does. Daesh is also responsible for crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing, directed at these same groups, and in some cases also against Sunni Muslims, Kurds, and other minorities. I say this even though the ongoing conflict and lack of access to key areas has made it impossible to develop a fully detailed and comprehensive picture of all that Daesh is doing and all that it has done.
And the Israeli Defense Ministry withdrew permission given to residents of the Gaza Strip to attend Friday prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, citing exploitation of the permit system. Israeli authorities say the permits were revoked after, quote, inappropriate misuse of the permit and exploiting inappropriately the Israeli civil policy. It is unclear for now if and when the permits will be given again. And EU leaders are meeting with Turkey's prime minister in Brussels today to search for a solution to the migrant crisis, as more than 10,000 migrants, mostly from Syria, stranded for weeks at a border camp near the Greek-Macedonia border, eagerly await for news since the so-called Balkan route has been shut.
My message to those who are meeting today is for them to emphasize with the people here, with the children. These people all escaped war. You extended your hand to us. We didn't come here to live in camps and in cold weather. With God's willing, something good will come out of this meeting. I hope they will have a conscience and feel for us.
I didn't care. I didn't care. I'm handling it. Just my dream to cross the border because we're on our way from the war. We're looking for peaceful land to protect us. That's what we're looking for. Please, Europe, we came here to cross the border. I know you have a big heart, everybody in Europe, We need that.
And according to local reports, Brazilian parliament has approved a committee to examine the impeachment of President Dilma Rousseff. This comes as leftist leader Luiz da Silva was sworn in as Rousseff's chief of staff today, amid a deepening political crisis, as protests against his appointment continued for a second day. But soon after the swearing-in ceremony, a federal judge in Brazil issued an injunction to suspend the appointment on the grounds that it prevented, quote, the free exercise of justice. Here's more in the following report.
Just hours after Lula da Silva was sworn in by Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff, a federal judge in Brazil had issued an injunction to suspend da Silva's appointment as Rousseff's chief of staff.
For the good of Brazil, all this hullabaloo is not the voice of the streets. It is an incitement of the prejudgments that should end the good of Brazil.
This comes after protests have once again erupted in Brazil as an incriminating conversation between President Dilma Rousseff and da Silva had been released by the court, which protects him from prosecution in the ongoing corruption scandal following the charges filed against him last week for money laundering and fraud as part of the Petrobras investigation over bribes and political kickbacks. Critics were saying recorded phone calls implicated that Rousseff's nomination was for the purpose of Lula's immunity.
Lula, deixa eu te falar uma coisa. Seguinte, eu tô mandando o Messias junto com o papel para a gente ter ele e só usa em caso de necessidade, que é o termo de posse.
Federal Judge Sergio Moro claims a taped conversation proves their attempts to sway prosecutors in favor of former President Lula da Silva. Although there is no evidence it was actually carried out, the recordings have brought renewed calls from the opposition for Rousseff's resignation.
Today, Brazil had to see the president of the country, Dilma Rousseff, in a dialogue with former President Lula da Silva, trying to obstruct justice. There is no other route other than the president's immediate resignation.
The scandal only adds to the uproar in Brazil over the corruption charges, but lawmakers from Rousseff's Workers' Party are ignoring the public dissent, sticking by their leader, and laying blame on Judge Moro.
They want to take down the government by force, disrespect the Constitution, carry out selective criminal leaks, like Judge Sergio Moro does, who will be held responsible for this. We will take legal and judicial measures against Judge Sergio Moro. He can't do that.
Tensions remain at an all-time high for the country. The streets of Brazil's capital overflowed with protesters as they demanded Rousseff's resignation and Lula's arrest, leading to riot police firing pepper spray on more than 5,000 demonstrators outside the presidential palace and Congress building. Despite recent events, Lula's legacy remains, and he is still regarded as one of Brazil's most influential leaders.
Donald Trump's appearance at the upcoming pro-Israel AIPAC policy conference in Washington has at least one Jewish group planning to protest. The group of professionals and clergy, which call itself Come Together Against Hate, say that Trump and his hate speech have no place at the annual summit. This comes after U.S. network Fox News called off a Republican debate next week after frontrunner Trump announced he wasn't taking part. And those were your latest headlines with i24 News. Be sure to join us again in 20 minutes. Thank you for watching.